Okay guys, so we're working on the Amanda Jane 7 pocket work apron. Okay, so the first step I went through and I cut all my fabric and then I pressed the pockets into place. So now I'm going to hem the top of each of the pockets. So there we go, we've got both of the top hems done on our pockets. The next step is that we need to lay them out where they go. Now, there are specific measurements given on the paper of where they're supposed to lay, and we are supposed to lay them about like this. But I am going to go take this and measure it to make sure I have everything laying correctly. Okay, I have my pockets put in place, and originally I had folded the bottom edge, but because it is not clear in the instructions whether you need to or not to, it just says to fold the edges and press them under. And I originally pressed that bottom hem under, but I do not believe you need to, since it is part of the hem. It's going to be caught in the hem of the skirt. You should not need to hem it under. And for those who are not familiar with garment construction, I did refer to it as a skirt. That is because when we are sewing together aprons or anything, you know, it can be a shirt with a peplum top. That bottom portion would still be called a skirt. So that is why I refer to it as a skirt. We're not actually sewing a skirt together. We're just sewing the apron together as the instructions are telling us. Kind of ended up stretching down at the bottom, but that's not a big deal. We'll trim that off. Gonna go from the same bit here. Now, I am reinforcing the stitches at the top of my pocket because otherwise, as you use it, your pocket will become loose. And we don't want that to happen. There we go. And now on this side. Now, normally with pockets like this, I would actually do, well, with any applique pockets. That's what this type of pocket that is a patch on the front would be called, is an applique pocket. Normally, I would use a bar tack at the top to secure it, rather than just back stitching. And a bar tack is just a certain way that you apply the stitches, which, if you guys are interested, I would be happy to show you in another video how you would do a bar tack. And maybe we can even do some garment sewing videos. Okay, so our pockets are applied to our large front pocket, and we've got our front apron piece. We're just going to lay this right over the top and line it up along the edges. Okay. Now, They want us to measure over 7 inches from the edge. So, and I've got a tailor's chalk pen, which I'm going to use. And I'm just going to mark it like this. And now I can just line up the edge of my ruler, line on the edge of my ruler with my mark of tailor's chalk and mark from top to bottom. I actually don't need it on this portion up here, just on the pocket. So I went a little bit over, ignore that. They do draw it through the smaller pocket. Now we're going to measure over 7 inches from there, which is right here. And I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to line up the edge of my ruler with the edge of the fabric and draw a line top to bottom of my pocket. Now I'm going to measure over 7 inches again, make another line, and just do the same thing again. This is how we are creating our pockets. And now we have 4 pockets. We just need to sew along each of them to separate them. All right, let's go do that. All right, here we are at the sewing machine, ready to stitch this together. Okay, so for this portion, we have this part already completed. Now we're going to take our apron back. We're going to put it right sides facing each other over the top. And we're going to stitch along the sides, both of them. And then we're also going to stitch along the bottom. Make sure you're stitching the bottom to catch the bottom of your pockets and not across the top. We don't need to stitch the top. My pocket is trying to escape me. This is one good place to pin if you find that pinning helps you. There's nothing wrong with throwing a pin or a clip in right along where your pocket meets and your bottom. Now it says to sew this with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now you'll notice I like to sew right off of the edge of my fabric and then turn it, as opposed to stopping 1/2 inch from the edge and turning. I just feel like this gives me a little bit more secure stitching, and there's less likely to be a pucker there. One thing you may notice with me sewing this together is that I am not being extremely careful to have everything perfectly lined up. I'm kind of just getting it in the ballpark. And if it kind of wanders a little bit, that's not the end of the world. Garment sewing is very different from quilting in the fact that if you go over a hair in quilting, your block might end up too small. Whereas in garment sewing, it's really not the case. You can end up with a beautiful finished product just by doing close enough is good enough. That sounds horrible. It's not really close enough is good enough, but kind of is. So don't sweat it if pockets shift or move or your edges aren't exactly perfectly lined up. Got this peeking out the side. I'm not worried about that. If it was quilting, I would definitely be lining that up much more closely. But there's no need for the seam ripper here. We've got it all under control. As long as you stay within about, I'd say 1/8 of an inch, you are going to be just fine. And in some cases, you can even wiggle as far out as 1/4 inch because we've got large seam allowances with garment sewing. We're talking 1/2 inch here. A lot of them are 5/8 of an inch. So you have some wiggle room. Now, it recommends trimming this up, so I will do that. However, it also recommends trimming the corners close at a slant. But I have a trick that gives me perfect points without doing that. So let me trim this and then I will show you. All right, we're back now. And I trimmed the bottom, but I didn't trim the sides. I don't find that as necessary. Let me show you that trick of how to get perfectly turned points. We're going to take one side and we're going to finger press it right along that seam allowance. Then we're going to pinch in this other side and finger press it along the seam allowance. Now I'm going to hold this with my fingers and I'm going to come in and meet that, grab that from underneath and inside. So I've got my thumb on the outside and I've got my pointer finger on the inside. And I'm just going to hold it there while I turn the fabric. And as you can see, that gives me crisp, perfect points that are actually much better than if I were to clip close at an angle. All right, so we've turned our skirt of our apron inside right, or inside out. Inside right. I guess you'd call it inside right. Now, on to the next step. All right, now we are on to the ties of our apron. So, we are going to sew all of our short ends together. Make sure that if you're using one of the directional fabrics, they are facing the same direction. And do 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch like we were doing on everything else. All right. And we have 3 tie pieces. So now we gotta sew this one. Now it tells us to press this in half, going the full length. So I'm going to do that and I'll be right back. All right, now before I attach my waistband, I am going to go through and top stitch all the way around the sides and the bottom of this. It just makes everything lay a little bit nicer, which you could just press this and it would do that, but it also gives it a little bit more stability, and I feel like it gives things a little bit more finished look at the end. So that is what I'm going to do. Now I am stitching about 1/8 of an inch from the edge there. And when you do this, anytime you're doing top stitching, if it's only going to show on one side, then you want to roll your fabric between your fingers and have maybe just a slight bit of it going a little bit more towards the back where you're not going to see it. Doesn't have to be much. Little tiny fraction of 1/8 of an inch. It's not even 1/8 of an inch, it's a fraction of 1/8 of an inch, and that is more than enough. You can see that here. It doesn't even really show as being more to that side. It's really just reading as being equal. But when I'm rolling it, that is how I roll it. And when I say roll it, I mean just rolling it between my fingers back and forth like that until I get it just where I want it to be. Oops, I've got a stray thread here. Let me clip that. It's always good to clip those stray threads as you come across them, because if you wait and you're like, oh, I'll just get it at the end, by the time the end comes, either you forget to do it or you forget where it went. It just kind of disappears on you. I can't tell you how many times that has happened to me. And I'll remember exactly, or I'll think I remember exactly where it was at. When I go back to look for it, I just can't find it. So it's weird. They'll disappear like that on you. And you won't see it again until you're wearing it. And there are no thread snippers or scissors anywhere around. It's what I always used to hear called Murphy's Law. I don't know how common that saying is, but I know as a kid I used to hear that all the time. And my only point of reference for that name was there was a TV show called Murphy Brown. So whenever I heard the saying Murphy's Law, I always thought it was supposed to be a rule made up by the lady in that show. I don't know, for all I know, maybe it actually is. But that was what I thought as a kid, because nobody ever told me who Murphy was or why they were making up annoying rules for life that meant things always went wrong if they could. And it seemed like everything always went wrong in that show, so it seemed to fit. All right, we've got this all top stitched and ready to go. So our next step is to find the center of our waistband and the center of our apron front. And then we're going to match them up. Now, the center of my apron front is very easy to find because my pocket is stitched right in the center. And I kind of still have a crease here where I was naughty and did not iron that. The center of your waistband you can find by meeting up the two ends and then following it all the way from those two ends down. All right, and so I've got the center of my waistband. I am just going to finger press that and snip off these hanging pieces that I've got, these little threads. I'm going to meet up this center mark on my waistband with the center fold on my apron front. And I'm going to open this up like so. And clip it. And this I definitely recommend clipping. You don't want to go into this blind. Doesn't require a whole ton, but I think about 3 on each side is enough for me. And one there. One last one here. Okay. Now I'm going to sew this a 1/2 inch, just like all of my other seams. Yeah, last night I was trying to read the directions on this pattern, and it was just not making any sense to me whatsoever. I don't know if it was because I was tired or if it's just written in such a way that it does not compute well with my brain. But I swear I read that pattern 3 or 4 times and could not make sense of it. Went to bed, figured I'd look at it today after getting a good night's sleep and see if I could understand it any better. And thankfully, I did. It still took a little bit of, it still was not quite, second nature, but I could make sense of it, and that's what matters. All right, so now we just need to bring this down like this and sew it into place. This would be, again, a good place to use some clips. If you have some larger ones, this would be ideal for that. I have my larger ones somewhere else, so I'm just gonna have to make do without them. We are going to start at the end and press in 1/2 inch and then press in 1/2 inch on the top and bottom. Now I'm going to get this started because I find it easier to continue with that if I have it started. And then I will go through and even everything up. And this is one place where I will pivot instead of sewing off the edge. To adjust as we go. And there is nothing wrong if you decide that you want to pin this beforehand instead of adjusting as you go. Or better yet, if you wish to press, that would certainly make things a lot easier on you. But sometimes I enjoy making things harder on myself. So I'm just going to do it as I go because I'm a little bit too lazy to bring this in the other room and press it with the iron. And for some reason, I think this is less work. I will say it does give you a neater result though when you do that. And I will probably hit all of this with the iron at the very end. Now, one thing you got to be careful of is, and you don't have to worry about this as much if you iron it, but you can sometimes pull one, either the top or the bottom, more than the other and make a wobbly strap. And nobody likes a wobbly strap. I know I don't. Now the instructions tell you to finish it off here. But anytime I do straps or ties, I like to top stitch on both sides. I just feel like that gives you a much neater finish and a much more durable strap. And it only takes a moment to do because this part you don't have to constantly adjust. There we go. Our apron is finished. Let's go take a look at it. So that's our finished apron. And it came out really cute. Let me zoom out some so that you can see it. But there it is. And it does fit. All right, so that's it. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.